Welcome to Why I Quit, a show that covers real people quitting their 9-to-5 jobs in search of something different. Listen to inspiring conversations where we dive deep into the stories of why people quit their jobs, what were the hardest parts, where are they now, and any advice for people following the same path. We are so excited to introduce Gino Cordone as this week's guest on Why I Quit. Listen as Gino discusses his journey of leaving his corporate career in mechanical engineering. Learn how he went from a side hustle to starting his full-time business called Pleasant Podcast. Get inspired hearing how he continued to learn and pivot to grow and scale his business by helping others create their own podcasts. Hey, Gino, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Dave. Appreciate it.
Well, I'm excited to dive into your story. Do you mind kicking it off, telling me a little bit about where you're from and your education background?
Yeah, so I grew up in Colchester, Connecticut. I went through high school and everything there. And then I went to the University of Hartford for mechanical engineering and did my 4 years there and went straight into military defense contracting career, if you will. I worked for Electric Boat down in Groton for about 3 years. Then I moved over to Pratt & Whitney. And then after about 3 years at Pratt & Whitney, I kind of quit for good. And that's kind of the short of it.
Perfect. Yeah. And tell me a little bit about your journey. Were you expecting to be in mechanical engineering your whole career? Did you ever have entrepreneurial goals, or, what was kind of your mindset as you're going from college into your, early career?
It was certainly like a rushed decision to do engineering for college, just based off of like what people were telling me and, hey, you're good at math, you should go do this thing. And I was like, well, all right, I guess that sounds like a good choice. I never really like had a definitive decision or like any time to think about what I really wanted to do, I guess. So I kind of just went with it, went with the flow. It sounded like a good idea. And engineering school itself was fun because it was super challenging and I was learning at like a rapid pace, and that was actually like fun. And then once I graduated and got my first job, I remember just being like very confused about the whole corporate system. I mean, Electric Boat and Groton's a very, very big company, and just like the way things were done and like how people, I guess, knew how to play the game and, that sort of thing. And it was just all new for me. And I just wanted to get in there and like do things and like engineer. And I found that a lot of it was more or less like paperwork sort of stuff. And I thought at first, all right, maybe it's my group. Maybe I need to go to a different group. And I never actually switched groups, but I like tried to be involved in like a lot of other departments and kind of just found more or less of the same. And then after about 3 years at EB, I kind of knew that I didn't want to do it anymore. But at the time I was driving like over an hour to go to work back and forth each way. And I was like, I got to get something that's just easier. So I had a buddy who got me into Pratt, and I was like, I'll just do my 8 hours. I'm not going to try more than that. I'll just give what I have then, and then I'll figure it out from there. And that was kind of the first, I guess, inkling for me of like not wanting to do this for the rest of my life. And that's a couple years into Pratt & Whitney is when I started my side business. So yeah, I guess accepting that job, I kind of knew that I wasn't going to be there long term, but it took me about 3 years to leave there.
And did you ever have entrepreneurial aspirations growing up, or was it a matter of like, I know I don't want to do this for the rest of my life, so I want to figure out something to do on my own, or where was your mindset at?
Yeah, I think I've always had a bit of an entrepreneur mind. They say that it's hereditary, and my dad was an entrepreneur at one point. Before like we kind of grew up, he had multiple businesses and like apartments and stuff like that. And so he would always like talk about that. So that was always in my head. And I think that I kind of gravitated towards that subconsciously. But yeah, I mean, even in high school, I remember taking an entrepreneur class. When college started, I thought like, okay, maybe I should do like a business, but then business was kind of always talked down upon in my circle of friends for some reason. Like that was the easy way out or whatever. I think it may have been more beneficial than engineering, practically speaking. But yeah, I thought engineering was like the right decision. But yeah, I think I've always kind of had the mind of being an entrepreneur or wanting something of my own.
And talk to me about the process of figuring out your side hustle. Were you trying
Mhm.
different things and seeing what stuck? Did you have like one idea that was the main one and that's what you ran with, or what was that process like?
I guess I have a pretty logical working brain, not so much the other whatever side of the brain that is, right or left, I don't remember. But I kind of just thought about like, well, what other skills do I have that I could use to make money at? And I've always been involved in music. I've always like really liked music, and I got into recording my own bands and stuff like that. And I just liked the idea of being able to record and manipulate audio. So I kind of taught myself how to do that just in like the downtime of my corporate career. And when I was like, all right, I got to get out of this and I want to start my own business, I thought like, okay, well, how can I use this skill that I already have and be able to make money with it, or start a business around it? And at the time, I was following a lot of people. There's this one guy, Graham Cochran, that I followed a lot, and he is an audio guy originally, and I learned a lot of like audio engineering from him and that sort of thing. And then he kind of pivoted and started another business that taught people how to run online businesses. So this was the same time I was like really into him, and I was like, okay, well, how can I like figure out how to do what he's doing? Because I really like admired what he was doing. And his whole philosophy was um, like working less and getting paid more and having that work life balance. And that was something I always like resonated with. I knew that I could do like the audio engineering thing, but I kind of didn't really want to like be an audio engineer for a band, because I knew guys that did that, and it's nothing but like working all the time. And I do enjoy music, but I could see that getting like super old and tiring and burnt out real fast. So I knew I didn't really want to do that. And then one day I was listening to a podcast, because I like to listen to them a lot, and it was like a good podcast. Like I like the content and the conversation and stuff, but the audio was like so bad it was hard to listen to. And then I was like, oh, I wonder if like I could do that and like help that podcaster make his audio sound better. I wonder if that's a thing. And this was probably back in like 2008, 17, 18. And I like Googled it quick, and there was like a few people that did like podcast editing, and I was like, oh, cool, I could do that. So I like made a website. I was super excited about it. I built like the whole thing out, never made a website before, figured out how to do it. And then like made an Instagram and like launched it. And I was like, all right, cool. Now people are going to pay me to do this. Lot of hard lessons learned since then, but realized that like it's not the if you build it they will come. So I slowly gained some clients and like made connections with people and started doing more things for those connections, and word of mouth through those connections, meeting new connections, and being strung along this like path of trying to be helpful to the people that I was in contact with, which is kind of something I'm like almost dealing with now, or I've always pivoted a lot, and I think now I'm finally realizing like, okay, well, what is it that you want to be doing, and how do you get there versus just kind of saying yes to a bunch of different things.
That kind of transitions into almost every guest on this show that is starting their own business with a side hustle has the decision of like when's the right time to make the leap. And so obviously there's inherent risk in terms of stability, money, all of these things. How did you think about having enough validation to actually make the leap and quit your job? Did you have specific benchmarks you were going for, a time frame? What did that look like for you?
I remember being at my last job, Pratt Whitney, and just being like angry, like all the time, going into work, being like, I don't want to be here. Like this isn't a good use of my time. And then the pandemic hit, and we all got sent home, and I worked from home for like the entire 2020. And I at first it was awesome, because I was like, oh, this is perfect. Like I can do my business and I can do the Pratt and Whitney. I had two computers on my desk at all times. Like we were all home, right? We didn't go anywhere. Like at first it was exciting because I thought I had more time, and then I got to the point where like after months of that, I just got so burnt out. And at the end of 2020, I was like about to give up. I'm like, I got to pick one of these things. Like it's both of them aren't working. I'm like completely ruining myself. Like I need to pick one thing and then go for it. And again, like you mentioned, it's like part of the struggle of like starting a side business. It's like you can see the potential in it, but you don't have the time for it, and like you're just waiting for the right time, waiting for the right time. And it wasn't the right time when I quit. I mean, I don't think you ever find the right time. But I had prepared. I've always been like somebody who's thought about being prepared and money and that sort of thing. So I had a decent savings set aside, and I was like, you know what? Like I'm completely burnt out. Like I can't keep doing this. Let's just go for it now. See what happens. Like I'm don't have too many commitments in my life. I'm not married. I don't have kids or anything like that. So, why not? Like this is the time. Like I got to do it or I'm never going to do it. At the end of 2020, I quit and kind of did my business full time, still kind of being stuck home from the pandemic.
And what was your confidence level, when you made that leap? Were you super nervous being like, what am I doing? Or were you a level of that, like, I know if I have the time and space, I can figure this out over a certain period of time? Like,
Mm-hmm.
where was your mindset at?
There was certain points where my mindset was there's this rapper that I like, and his name's Russ, and he wrote a book about like how he just had like crazy amount of self-belief to the point where it's like delusion. And I kind of resonated with that a little bit. Like I had a little bit of delusion of like, oh, this is going to be easy. I'm just going to put more time to it and it's going to work. So I wouldn't, I'd say that I had confidence in it, but it was also a little bit of delusion because there was so much I didn't know. And I mean, still to this day, I'm learning so much. So right when I quit, I was really excited and I was like, this is going to be awesome. I have all these things I'm going to do. And I did do a lot of things, but none of them really worked, I guess you would say. So, I mean, after the first year of being home and doing 100% of this, I burned through a pretty big amount of savings and kind of like reflected and was like, all right, well, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing that is working? And how do I do more of that and less of the stuff that I think should be working and isn't working? So obviously it's been like a huge learning process, but I think I'm getting better at being able to make, I guess, smarter decisions as far as like what is going to work, what time should you put into future things, and that sort of thing, and the balance of the whole thing.
We hear that a lot, especially from like solo entrepreneurs, because you go from you're wearing all the hats, so you have to
Mm-hmm.
do everything, which can spread yourself thin from times. I know you've talked about like a lot of learning experiences. What were some of the biggest learning experiences year one? That you were able to adjust and be able to kind of keep going. From post year one.
There were a lot. There were a lot of like corporate habits that I had that were proved difficult to break, as far as just like working, 8 to 5, or, working in a specific time, or like always feeling like I had to be doing something busy work wise. Like I would be working on things that really didn't matter very much, but I thought that they did because I had to have that like busy mindset of like, oh, I'm busy. I'm doing this thing. So therefore I'm being busy. And it's like, well, maybe you don't need to do that, or maybe maybe it's not smart to invest so much time into this thing that when you don't even know if it's going to work. That was another one, is having an idea about something, thinking that was the right answer, putting a lot of time into it, and then like launching it or putting it out there and it does nothing. And realizing like, okay, well, maybe I need to do more market research on this, or ask people and have conversations with people about what they need, and how I can help them and be more of service. There was a lot of me thinking in my own head, like, this is the right answer, and then working towards that, when a lot of the times it wasn't the right answer. It was just what I thought. And even like you alluded to, working alone, I think, is the hardest part because there's nobody to like talk it out loud with or to course correct. And at the time, we were still a lot, a lot of the times we were still being at home from the pandemic and being isolated and that sort of thing. So the whole first year was a lot of just me kind of spinning myself out.
Would you say there was like a specific moment when you were like, I have something here, okay, I've made it and I have a business that I can keep going with? Was there a specific moment, a specific deal, anything in particular that really stands out to you?
I'd say after the first year, I had like kind of another breaking point where I looked at like how much I made, and it was very close to the year before that, which I was doing it part time. And at that point, I was thinking about it, and I was like, all right, well, that didn't help, right? The more time towards it didn't help. So you either need to figure out how to make this work or do something else. And I think the decision that I made to keep going was what helped me actually make more progress. Because I think then I don't know, maybe I thought about it in a different way. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I just started getting more clients, and I started, I guess, valuing myself more maybe, and charging what I wanted to charge with clients, and finding some, a lot of people, obviously, you're not going to get every client, and a lot of people won't, won't work with you, but getting some clients that, like, I guess, saw the value in what I was doing. And I worked with a couple bigger clients that I guess was kind of validating. But I think the biggest thing was to just think about it in a different way. I think I was putting a lot of pressure on it being successful or not successful. And at some point, I switched my mindset, and I was like, okay, well, if you keep doing it, it will be successful. You just have to be patient with it, and you can't expect to make this amount of money, the same amount as I did in corporate year one. Like, it's not going to happen like that. And if I tried to like remove the money piece of it from my mind, that was, I think, the biggest shift for me when things then started catching on, and I started getting some more clients, and doing more things, and being able to pay myself through the business and that sort of thing. And another key piece to that, I think, was also getting a side job. And the whole first year I was very stubborn, I guess, and I was like, nope, this is all I'm doing. I'm not doing anything else. I'll just burn through my savings. And I did, and it was a lesson. But having some sort of side job, I think, has been helpful. I still have a sort of a side job that maybe we could talk about a little bit later. But that was really like, it removed the pressure as far as like thinking about it only from a money aspect, because it's important, obviously. But I think I was putting all the emphasis in like, how can I make money here, and making decisions purely based off of that, and then putting myself in positions that I didn't really want to be in. So I think that that's been a helpful thing too for me.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And it's something we talk about a lot on this show because I think, a lot of times when people quit their job, they go to zero in terms of income because there's, a 6 month, a year long, sometimes a multiple year long process until you are able to pay yourself through the business. And so, I do think there's like such huge value in terms of like a side job and being able to lengthen the runway to give yourself a chance to like validate. I think kind of going off on that, I'd love to kind of hear about how you thought about like the time and prioritizing the time as you went into year two. Cause I think that is like a piece that I think a lot of people struggle with and try to figure out of like, okay, like, if something isn't working, how do I focus on having enough time there on top of your side job? Like, how did you start prioritizing your time in a way that started helping grow the business for you?
I think something I started doing was like evaluating what I was doing. So at the end of every month, I do all my finances and look at numbers and that sort of thing. And then I also look at like what I did that month. I keep a constant list of like wins, I guess, that I had in a month, and I'll look at like the things that I thought went right, and then that kind of helps me plan more going into the next month, of looking at like, okay, well, this was a good thing to be doing, or I made good money with this client, so how can I focus more on this client and maybe, offer them new services or something like that. So I think evaluating, like stopping and evaluating what I was doing so that I could do more of that, was something that's been helpful for me.
I'd like to go from there over to the personal side a little bit. So, like, obviously, you had your side hustle in the job, which, caused burnout and, kind of force you to make the decision of which way you wanted to go. I think a lot of times entrepreneurs kind of suffer from that as well when they're starting their business because, a lot of times they're leaving their job to give themselves more autonomy, but then they're working sometimes more than they even were beforehand. So, how did you think about how you wanted to prioritize like work life balance as you started the business, and has it changed to where you are today as well?
I think maybe I've always valued the work life balance part of it, because that was part of the appeal for me to work on your own. It was because I wanted to have more life than than work. And working for yourself, there's always something to do, but I think I've always done a decent job of being able to like step away from it and I'm not relaxed because I'm not great at relaxing, but but at least step away and have like more of a balance. Like, if it's on a Tuesday and my mom wants to go to lunch, like we can go to lunch. And like I don't say I'm too busy to do that. I value those things more, I guess. And I've always been good at keeping that sort of balance. Maybe to a detriment, maybe not. But I haven't really struggled because I also know myself too, and I know when I'm starting to get burnt out, and I know that I don't want to do that because I know what it feels like. So I try to recognize when am showing signs of getting burnt out, and then I'll take an afternoon off, or I'll take a couple hours or go for a walk or something. And because I also read a lot, so sometimes it's reading a self-help book or a business book, and the education part of it too is something that I've always valued, I guess. So I'm always trying to change my mindset because to me there's like a pre and post, and the old mindset is like work, 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 and you always have to be working to be successful. And then my kind of newer mindset is you got to take care of yourself first so that you can work. And I try my hardest to lean towards that one. Of course, there's times when I go back and forth with it, but I try to value my mental state and put myself in a position to where I can be productive when I work and I can come up with new ideas. Because there's been so many examples and experiences that when I quiet my mind, or when I don't worry about the things that I should be worrying about, quote unquote, then I'll have an idea, or I'll think about something, or I'll solve a problem that I've been working on. So I know that that's of value, and I try to be in that state as much as I can be. Obviously not perfect, but I try to be.
Yeah, and in terms of reading, would you say there's like a specific book, as you were going through the process, that was like most impactful for you?
So many books. I don't know. I'd even have to just pull my list of books, but there's been so many helpful books. I mean, I remember reading the 4 Hour Work Week when I was still at my job, and just like being so fired up by it. And I'm like, yes, this everything this guy's saying is 100% correct. So that one was a big one. That's like, I guess, the Bible of quitting your job. Like I said, Graham Cochran was a big, and he didn't have he's got a book now, but he didn't have a book at the time, but he had a podcast that I listened to a lot. But yeah, I mean, everything, not even just business books, but like there was one book that I read that was really impactful. I think it was called How to Be a Badass at Making Money. And it was all psychological. It was nothing to do with like numbers or like marketing or sales. It was all how you think about money. And that really helped me shift my mindset to like, it helped me change my mindset to an abundance mindset, to where I think about money as not like this resource that's fleeting, but something that's always there. And I enjoy books that can help me shift a perspective in my mind. Another book too that doesn't really have anything to do with business, The Celestine Prophecy, has been an awesome book for me, just as far as like the way that I want to live my life and that sort of thing. It's kind of a spiritual book, kind of a life lessons book, but there's another one too about business. The Go Giver is an awesome book too. That one I read really early on and has helped me make a lot of decisions with my business, as far as like giving first, and then like, not expecting, but like giving first and then getting more back that you ever even imagined. So that was another good one.
Kind of similar to your one about like kind of like money and the psychology, like the psychology of money by like Morgan Housel. I think is like kind of a similar concept where it's not actually about like the X's and O's, and it's about like the emotional behavior behind spending and earning. And I think like when you read books that make you like think about something in a different way, I think a lot of times those are like super impactful. So kind of going off on learning, I'd love to know, now that you've been through the process and, are running a successful business, there's a lot of people listening to this who, are looking to follow a similar path. Was there a piece of advice you were given, or a piece of advice you wish you knew, when going through the process, that you think you would give a person?
Maybe something that I've learned and am still learning is to not think that you have it all figured out. When I first started, I thought that I had to be the expert on the topic, right? The expert on podcasting or audio engineering. And I would always kind of treat situations like I knew what the answer was. But I think if you can approach things more out of curiosity and not out of the answer, then it makes things easier. It's like, because I remember being like very stressed about like situations that I haven't done before, or like telling somebody that I could do this and doing it for the first time and putting so much pressure on myself to get it right. If you don't think of it in that term, and you could just be more even open, like, hey, I've done this for other people. Maybe I could do this. Maybe I can't. We'll see how it is. I mean, most times people have not received that negatively. They've been like, oh, okay, that's cool. Like, we'll see how it goes or whatever. Like, it's not, you don't have to be the expert. Like, you can be learning and always learning. And I think once I kind of dropped the ego of like thinking that I knew everything, that was super helpful. So that was one piece of advice, I guess, maybe I would try to give my younger self, is you don't have to know everything. You could just go into it as you are, and like as you are is good enough.
And something we ask every guest is, we try to think about it in terms of like not too long term, but not too short term. So we think about it over a 3 to 5 year period. Is there something that you're most excited about? It could be for growing your business, personal, both, like what gets you most excited over the next 3 to 5 years?
So I'm really excited about, I guess, my next pivot, and really taking this pivot to do what I want to be doing and like where I want to be in the next couple of years. I'm getting a lot more into teaching podcasting instead of doing podcasting for other people. I started out just doing editing, and I've done recording and had a podcast studio and that sort of thing. And a lot of it is hands-on, and you have to be there. It's 1-to-1 time ratio, and I'm recognizing that it's not really where I want to be. So my next pivot is teaching podcasting, and I've done a couple score events and like really liked the way that like people were excited and asked questions, and I was able to answer their questions. And again, to not think that I have to know everything, but to know that like I've been doing this for a little bit now, and I have value that I could offer to other people. And I'm really excited I'm in the process, I guess, of creating this sort of like an 8-week course where I help people launch a podcast from nothing to being published. And it's kind of a course, but it's also going to be like a live Zoom thing where I can help answer people's questions and work with a small group of people. So I'm really excited to like get that moving forward, because from the feedback that I've gotten from people is that a lot of new podcasters don't have a lot of money to start a podcast. So to be able to work with me like one-on-one, it's going to be a lot of money because it's a lot of my time. So I've learned from talking with people what would work for them and what would work for me. So I feel like this next pivot that I'm doing is going to be something that works for more clients and more for me. And yeah, I'm really excited to get that going.
Love it. Well, I'm excited to follow along. And before we head out, if you could give everyone just an elevator pitch of your business, the best place to find you, and anything else you want to add before heading out.
Yeah. So my business is called Pleasant Podcast. Go to pleasantpodcast.com. I guess the tagline would be, I help people grow and launch their podcasts. But really, like I said, getting more into teaching podcasting and teaching people to podcast on their own, because it's going to be more sustainable for them, and it's going to help people. Again, one of my passions is having people do things that they believe in. And I think podcasting is a great vehicle to be able to do things that you're passionate about and that you care about. So I love to help people find their own path, I guess. But yeah, website, pleasantpodcast.com. I'm on Instagram, not really that active on it, but I try to be. And also have 2 podcasts that you can listen to me on. One of them is Working Towards Our Purpose, where I talk to people who do things that they really enjoy doing, and finding their own purpose in life. And then I have another one called Help Me Podcast, which is like a mini podcast where I give people tips and tricks on podcasting. So you can also, I can send you the links for that, and you can find me there.
Perfect. I'll drop those links in the episode description as well. And thank you so much for your time. It was awesome to hear everything you have going on. Looking forward to following along in your journey.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you for listening. It really means a lot to us. We want to hear from you as we keep growing. Please reach out on whyquit.co if you have any feedback or potential guests. A special thanks to Chris Dole for the music. Please check out his newest album, Here's to You, on Spotify. Thank you, and we will be back next week with another episode.